Hey guys, this is T, and you're listening to the Hidden Oaks Overdose Football Fix with Gar and Josh. Enjoy the show, and remember, stonks do go up.
Stonks haven't gone up for a while, T. Sorry about it. It is Saturday morning, 8 a.m., September 24th, 2022. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Hidden Oaks Overdose Football Fix podcast. I'm one of your lovely hostesses, the Garlic Johnson. We are joined, as always, by your other lovely hostess, the Joshua Mitchell. Josh, say hi to the folks out there.
Hi, folks.
Thank you so much for listening and being a core member of the show, Josh. We got the Discord. We got, Anchor. You can leave voicemails. No one's leaving voicemails, Josh. We might stop mentioning it. Voicemails are dead. Segment start times will be down in the description below, though, for people who don't want to listen. We made the show shorter for you, easier to listen to. But, if you still want to skip around, if there's something you particularly want to hear, like the Medical Minutes Triumphant Return, and listen to a real-life doctor talk about stuff, the segment start time will be down in the description for people who want to jump to that. Josh, how are we doing today?
I'm doing good. Had yesterday off, helped celebrate Nikita's birthday, even though it was on Wednesday. So had fun with that. And yeah, at the time that we went to Topgolf, and at the time of leaving, I had a top 10 score for the day because on their app they track that, and I'll take that. Especially because there were 7 minutes left on our timer, and I finished with 3 minutes left on that timer. So I hit 20 golf balls in 4 minutes and got a top 10 score. No big deal. How are you, Gar?
Wow. I mean, I'm doing good. I don't got any cool stories like that, bro. I'm not, I'm not with it quite like you are. Worked last night. Worked a concert. That was fun.
Bouncer
got
or musician?
Concert.
Well, yeah, I know, but were you playing bouncer or were you one of the musicians?
Oh, sorry, I was an usher. I just scanned tickets, dude.
Very nice. Where at?
Just where I work at my place of employment. But yeah, other than that, no, I've had a pretty uneventful week since last Tuesday. Since the last pod. I really haven't done much. I used to go on, I'm definitely at the time of year where, I obviously like to go on walks. I know I've mentioned that in the pod plenty of times, but now it is absolutely miserable to go outside and go on a walk, even if you put on a hoodie and stuff. So either I'm going to have to find a new mode of exercise. I don't want to pay for a gym membership because those are $30 a month for the cheapest these days, or I just got to get fat over the winter and then not get less fat next spring again. So we'll see, but pretty much the days of me going outside and walking, my long walks on the beach are done, and so now I got to find a new way to be less depressed, I guess. We'll see. But it is definitely fall. I don't know what it's like down in Big Lake, but up here it is definitely fall.
Yeah, it's definitely fall. Had a bit of the rain yesterday. Looking a little gloomy out there today, but we'll get through it.
Do you have heartburn? Are you struggling right now? What is you sound funny.
I was mid burp as you asked me that, so
all right.
Yeah, we'll get right into it there, folks.
Let's get into the show. Oh, shout out to Eric. Eric, you're going to want to hear the medical minute today, even though it's a little late. All right, first here we got the start and sit, Josh. I didn't put any effort into this. I'm really happy you did, though. Looks like you got some stats on us. What are our start and sit stats? Why should people listen to us, even though no one is asking us about any of these starts and sits? We're making them completely up on our own.
Well, yeah, it's just because they don't want to know. They don't want us to know that they need our help, so they actually do listen to us when we do this. I have numbers and stats. But last week we were 3 for 5, so over 500 again. But we had a plus 33.2 point difference. I think we were carried by one or two players there. And one of the ones that we lost was one of the ones similar to week 1 where we had two guys put up decent numbers. So it's not like you could have gone wrong with either one. Overall, we're 6.5 out of 10 with a positive 48.85 point swing. So hooray. So not too bad through 2 weeks. Obviously not 10 for 10, but probably not going to go perfect ever. So no big deal. Sorry, Eric. But yeah, so I made some picks, and like you said, I put the effort in this morning because it's very easy to just go onto that link that I posted and pick a few from there. So I plan on doing this segment on Saturday mornings before we start. So if you ever log on and go, this isn't done yet, don't worry about it. I can do it on the mornings.
All right. I definitely wasn't worried about it because I believed it was too early. It's just always the, wanting to show, at least pretend to put an equal effort, But all right. You want to hop right into the table here, Josh? We are the greatest and people should listen to us. That's the gist of what you just said, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right.
And this is where they finally get to listen to us agree on things instead of go back and forth.
Well, I mean, sometimes there's a little bit of a struggle to get us to that agreement, but I hear you.
Yeah. Okay, fine.
We are
but
forcing ourselves to agree.
Yeah. But first off, I picked the GOAT quarterbacks. We've got Dougie Davis-Mills at Chicago. He plays for Houston. And then we've got Joey Flacco, the New York Jets fill-in versus Cincinnati.
Whew. All right. Well, I mean, we look at the tail of the tape. I mean, Joe Flacco had a 14-point week, and then in traditional QB scoring, a 14-point week and then 26-point week. He had 59 attempts, then 44 attempts, over 300 yards in both, 4 touchdowns against Cleveland. Not really doing much rushing, which makes sense because he's a 37-year-old quarterback. But I don't know that Cincinnati is going to be that much tougher than Cleveland or Baltimore. Like, if anything, I would assume Cincinnati would be a pretty similar matchup to Cleveland for Joe Flacco. So, I mean, if he can put up similar numbers yet again, I would definitely ride with Joe Flacco. You look over to Davis Mills to see what he's been doing. He's had, only 23 completions or 19 completions for 240 yards or just 170 yards. He only had 7 points last week. He managed to get 15.5 against Indy week 1, but they're playing Chicago. Chicago should be a garbage team. But if you're going to make me choose between Dougie Mills and Joe Flacco, I definitely want to go Joe Flacco, but Josh, please tell me why I'm wrong, if you believe I'm wrong.
I feel like both of these would be, sleeper picks when you're playing on FanDuel, but if you're if you're struggling for money, you don't want to go big on quarterback. I would say, Joey Flacco has that kind of shown that he can get the job done as well as against a decent defense. Plus, they're at home. It might be a shootout if the Cincinnati offense turns it around. Otherwise, it might just be a complete curb stomp by the Jets, believe it or not. Just kidding. But yeah, I'd go Joey Flacco on this just because you mentioned his passing each game, and he's throwing the ball around a lot. So I think that they're just going to continue that trend. And I have no issue with Joey Flacco.
All right, the next one here, Josh, you have handcuffs. So we have Raheem Mostert, who's sitting behind how do I want to say this? A banged up Chase Edmonds, and then we also have one Jamal Williams, who is behind one banged up DeAndre Swift, who gets banged up every year. I tried to warn people, but so we're hoping that regardless of whether or not the starter in front of them plays, who has the better opportunity as we sit here Saturday morning, 8 a.m. What are you thinking, Josh, between Mostert or Jamal?
Both of them had decent weeks. Both of them, well, I don't know about Mostert, but I know Jamal had that solid week 1 where he handcuffed 2 touchdowns, and the last week he didn't get the ball much, but he did get it enough to at least produce some points. I'm leaning Jamal on this one just because he has an easier matchup in Minnesota, even though Minnesota's line is probably their strength. I think that Goff has done well enough to spread the ball around or throw the ball around to at least one guy, Amon-Ra St. Brown, to open up that pass game. Plus, Jamal isn't a slouch when it comes to catching the ball out of the backfield or lining up in slots or on the outside as a receiver either. So I would lean Jamal on this one. Buffalo's defense is pretty stingy, so that's where I'm leaning.
All right, I feel it. Looking at the tail of the tape again, week 1, Mostert had 3.2 points, and this is, I think, just standard scoring. But then he had 7.9 points week 2, had a much higher, he went over 55% of the snap share in week 2 for Mostert. He had 4.64 yards per carry in week 2, 11 rushes for 51 yards, 3 targets, 3 receptions for 28 yards. So a nice little scat back. I guess I don't know what the receiving numbers are for Edmonds, and I'm not going to look that up. Going over to Jamal, he has 11 and 12 attempts in the first 2 weeks. Of course, he had 2 touchdowns week 2 that really bolstered his numbers. Without those 2 touchdowns, he would have just had...
Week 1.
Week 1. Without those 2 touchdowns, he just would have had 3 fantasy points, but he can't really do that. He only had 11 attempts for 28 yards and then 12 attempts for 53 yards, so his yards per carry were also going up. He only had 1 target week 2 for 7 yards. Certainly, the Minnesota defense is a much nicer matchup, and so I'm definitely not afraid to ride Jamal with you, just because, like you said, the Buffalo defense is real. The ghost of Leslie Frazier's future is here, and he'll probably be a head coach again if he keeps running the Buffalo defense the way he has.
Yeah, so lock it in, Jamal.
Oh, for sure, Jamal.
All right, moving on, we have for the deeper leagues, in our case, I did notice one of them was in a starting lineup, but we have wide receivers, Jacoby Myers versus Baltimore, or Devonta Smith at Washington. Gar, I want to hear your thoughts on this one.
All right, so back to the tail of the tape. Jacoby Myers, starting with him, he had an 88% snap share, then went down to an 82% snap share. Not overly alarming just yet. Week 1, he had 6.2 fantasy points. Week 2, he had 9.5 fantasy points. Again, I think this is just in standard scoring because I just happen to have, I'm looking at all this on Sleeper, and I happen to have Deflate These Balls in the background, which is a old school scoring league. But he went from 6 targets to 13 targets, from 4 receptions to 9 receptions, from 55 yards to 95 yards. So Jacoby Myers does appear to be on the rise. Of course, this should be less of a defensive battle when they're playing Baltimore, but also does the game get so out of hand that the New England Patriots can't do anything? That's tough to see. Before I want to decide, though, let's go over and look at one Mr. Devonta Smith. He went from week 1, absolutely goose egg, 96% snap share, 4 targets week 1, but had 0 catches, 0 points, nothing like that. Week 2 against Minnesota, rip, he had 8 fantasy points, 99% snap share, 7 targets, 7 receptions, 80 yards. Of course, A.J. Brown is going to feast in that offense, but I mean, just looking at the snap share alone and the target numbers, well, I shouldn't say the target numbers because Jacoby Myers had 13 targets and 9 receptions. I definitely think Devonta Smith has the safer floor just based on the snap percentage. So I think I would lean Devonta Smith from a floor perspective, but I think Jacoby Myers could break out. Of course, Nelson Aguilar and Devontae Parker, it's unclear kind of who is the guy in New England, at least for me personally, whereas Devonta Smith has a very clear number 2 role. So I would lead Devonta, but if you want to go Jacoby, I guess I don't really care strongly. What do you think, Josh?
Yeah, that goose egg's scaring me off. And so I'm just, I was leaning Jacoby Myers because I believe he is their wide receiver 1. He had, 2 weeks with minimum 6 targets and then 13 targets. So even if his snap share isn't there, he's gotten more targets than Devonta Smith in both games. Plus he's put up more points. He doesn't have that touchdown, or he doesn't have a touchdown in there. And I'm looking at standard leagues, so he's 6 points minimum. But so I was leaning Jacoby because I think that he's one of those under the radar guys that you see people draft, aka me, and go, why would you take him? But when he's on the field, he gets the ball, and like you said, Devonta is the number 2 wide receiver, but I don't think he's the number 2 target share guy in that offense. I think Goddard is kind of ahead of him in that regard, and so I would go. I mean, I'm leaning Jacoby. And so that's just where I'm at. But, Devonta did have a good game against Minnesota. Washington's defense, I don't know where they're sitting, but Baltimore's defense, from what I recall, is okay. And so I don't care where we go.
No, so. I'll ride with you on Jacoby. That's fine. You had a stronger opinion than I did to start, so we'll do Jacoby Myers. Sit on the bench, Devonta Smith. You stink.
Yeah, plus you're only 15 pounds, so you probably blow away the moon.
All right, Josh. Next up, we have tight end, the start-sit scenario. We have Hayden Hurst at the New York Jets, and then we have Dawson Knox at Miami. What are you thinking for this one, pal?
Well, my heart wants Dawson Knox to go off because then I might not get eliminated in guillotine this week, and then my other heart wants Hayden Hurst to go off because then I might lose to Mr. Landvik by less than 20. But overall, I mean, Hayden Hurst has had some decent targets in the past few weeks, and then Dawson Knox, he didn't have nothing going on. First game, I think it was 1 catch, 1 target, but then the second week he had 4 for 41. So I think can't go wrong with either one. The Miami defense, they're giving up a ton of pass yards. Josh Allen can sling the rock around, but is it going to be to Dawson Knox or is it going to be to the other guys? because Gabe Davis might be coming back as well. And then, Joe Burrow likes to sling the rock around sometimes to the wrong team, but he does throw that rock. So, and then they're going up against the New York Jets. So who knows how that team's going to perform with Joe Flacco behind the wheel. But I guess I don't have an opinion at this point. I'd rather hear your arguments before I make my decision. So what do you have to say?
Sure. I think we can look at the tail of the tape, but even before that, the tight end scene in Cincinnati last year was absolutely abysmal. They had whatever the fuck his name was, CJ Uzama, or however the fuck you say his last name. And they also had Drew Sample, and just the tight end seems to be probably the fifth guy in the receiving pecking order. You got Chase, you got Higgins, you got Boyd, you got Mixon. So even if you're seeing targets, I don't think they're very high value targets. They're probably flat routes a lot, or those check downs, maybe just some sort of drag route or crossing route. Very simple, shallow routes if I had to assume. And so while you do like to see 8 and 7 targets, I have to assume that the fantasy ceiling is almost equal to the floor. So sure, maybe he'll get 5 receptions again, but is it going to be 5 receptions for a max of 50 yards? I mean, in PPR, that's 10 points. Ooh, it was only 25 yards last week, so that's, only 2 points or 7 points, depending on your scoring system. So, I think the floor and the ceiling are almost the exact same for Hayden Hurst, whereas Dawson Knox, obviously much lower floor. We've seen disappointing numbers from him both last year and already this year with 2 targets, 1 reception game 1, 5 targets, 4 receptions game 2. I certainly think after you watch Mark Andrews kind of light up Miami a bit last week, even though they do end up losing that game, I would much prefer Dawson Knox for the upside. I agree Dawson Knox floor is at 0, but Hayden Hurst is not sexy to me at all. Hayden Hurst does not excite me, so I would prefer Dawson Knox.
That's where I was leaning to, just because of him and Josh Allen are buddies, so I think that they're going to try and get him more involved in the offense. So I would go that route as well.
All right, we've got one more. This looks like you have a desperate flex play, maybe in some deeper leagues, or like in a guillotine where you have multiple flexes, or even in the Eric's BSB Dynasty League. We got 4 names out here, Josh, and they're kind of ugly, but we got Logan Thomas versus Philly, so a little tight end in the flex potentially. Noah Brown, who seems to have some chemistry with Cooper Kush, playing at the New York Giants. We have Devin Duvernay at New England, garbage, and then we have Naeem Hines versus KC on the absolute garbage Indianapolis Colts. Josh, obviously you put these names in here. Anything that's jumping out to you?
I want to know what Noah Brown has on Cooper Rush and why he's blackmailing him, because he definitely got that majority of the targets last week. With him at QB, I think it's, they've got that rapport. That's where I'm leaning. I guess if I were to rank them in any order, I would go, Noah Brown, Logan Thomas, Hines, and Duvernay in that order. But, if you have a strong argument for Logan Thomas, I'm not opposed to him either, because he has had some success there with Carl Wentz. So I don't know. What do you have to say on these ones?
Hines in a PPR format makes sense. He has, he's had 6 receptions and then 4 receptions for 50 yards and 37 yards. He's certainly not getting any rushing work is what you would expect. But Hines has just been unsexy to me. If anything, I expected him to be used more in this offense, and he hasn't been, especially with their game scripts. Like, they've been behind and stuff. So I don't know what's going on over in Indy, but I really don't want to touch a single fantasy asset in Indy until I can see them figure it out, even if this is like our desperate last, ditch spot, flex play or whatever. I don't want to touch Hines. Devin Duvernay, he's had 2 good weeks from a fantasy perspective. I still can't do it. I don't want to touch Devin Duvernay. Depending on whether or not you got that 6-point kick return touchdown last week, he did even worse for you in your league. Only 2 receptions for 42 yards. So I don't want to touch Duvernay. Between Noah Brown and Thomas, I think Noah Brown certainly has the higher ceiling because, again, he really seem to have that chemistry with Cooper Rush, and they're playing the Giants. So who knows? Maybe, whoever the defensive coordinator in New York will figure them out. But if we're down to Logan Thomas and Noah Brown, I'm fine with either. But, I'd rather with Noah Brown just for the high upside with the current QB situation.
Noah Brown it is. That's kind of where I was leaning just because of the recent week. There's our table. We've got that, and we'll tell you how perfect we did next week. FanDuel favorites. Last week we did one for each position, got a little bit beefy. So now we have, at least one, but more if you feel like strongly on them. So I see that you have two. I'll let you take one, and then I'll go one, and then you can go one.
All right, I'll go with the one I like the most this week. I mean, obviously they're questionable right now, but you got Godwin out, you got Julio Jones out, you got Mike Evans suspended. Brashad Perryman has been in this Tampa Bay system for a while. So, I mean, we've already seen that Jair Alexander isn't going to shadow the quote-unquote number one receiver. Obviously not saying Brashad Perryman's on the same level of Justin Jefferson as some of these other world-beating wide receivers, but assuming that Brashad Perryman has opportunities on Sunday versus Green Bay to get open, it's already proven that him and Tom Brady have chemistry, so Brashad Perryman at 5,300. I absolutely love it. I'm going to slam dunk that into my lineup, but it's also like a boom or bust play, so who knows? But I love Brashad Perryman this week.
Yeah, well, as someone who'd had Perryman on his team, he doesn't need to be shadowed by the number one corner. He is somebody that gets covered by his own shadow, so he's been in the league a while and has had some issues with dropping. So who knows? Maybe Tom Brady scared him straight, but I'm not going to line him up. But I see why you would, just because of the opportunity. My guy is the rookie out of Washington. We got Jahan Dotson. He's a wide receiver. He's $6,000. He's averaging, I think, 16 points per week in the FanDuel league. So it's not a bad value there. And I do believe that they go up against Philadelphia, so they should be throwing the ball a lot to try and keep up. Carl Wentz likes to toss the rock deep, so we'll see.
How much did Dotson cost there?
$6,000.
Wow! That's a low price!
Just had to. All right, my last one here. I just really like David Montgomery this week. I know people were, pronouncing the death of David Montgomery coming into the season with Khalil Herbert around. I think it's overblown, and I think this is their easiest opponent yet from a rushing perspective. So even at 7,100, not the greatest value. I love David Montgomery to feast this week versus Houston, and so he'll probably be in my lineup as well. So again, 7,100, not like a deal, but I love David Montgomery this week, and he appears to not be dead like a lot of people want to pronounce him. So I like him this week as well versus Houston, Josh.
Yeah. So moving on to the bust, something that I added last week. Last week, I think we did pretty good. I think that my guy busted. I don't know. I think you had CMC. I don't think he did too well, did he?
I mean, definitely not relative to all the other prices around him. I'd say he busted for sure.
All right. So this week I took CMC versus New Orleans. He's still 8,500. He's on the injury report because he had to go pee apparently. So there's that. But New Orleans stingy defense still, decent run defense. 8,500 is too much for me to put CMC in my lineup. So yeah, no other reasoning than that.
All right, for me, for the FanDuel bust this week, I don't want to get in trouble over this, but I got Tyreek Hill. I don't think that Leslie Frazier is going to let Tyreek Hill have a great big game. We've seen that defense is real. It's raw. It's real raw. Of course, Mike McDaniel can get creative and this and that, but I have faith in the defensive prowess of Buffalo that we've seen so far. So I think that, if you want to see someone to have a breakout game, maybe it's Jalen Waddle, or maybe they find creative ways to get Mike Gesicki just operating as a receiver again the ball. But I don't think the Buffalo defense wants Tyreek Hill. I think they're going to do everything they can to shut down Tyreek Hill specifically versus just playing their scheme. So I think Tyreek Hill will be a bust this week, at least at the price point of 8,400. So I am fading Tyreek Hill this week, but I don't really have any shares of him in any league, so I don't have any stakes really.
Well, see, as someone who's going up against him, I really hope he gets 0 catches for 0 yards.
Do you think that's realistic?
No.
All right, Josh, we can move into some sleeper over and unders just real quick. Then we can just kind of rapid fire through these. Not that we're pressed on time necessarily, but we play the sleeper over under contest, and why not? I'll double down on my love of Montgomery. His line for rushing and receiving right now is at 89.5. I definitely like the over on that. I like the Kirk Cousins over for 276.5 passing yards. For me, pretty much any game that the Lions are involved in until further notice should be considered a shoot shootout. So I love Kirk absolutely throwing up some numbers as well this week. I like Johnny Munt, who was a tight end for the Vikings. No one else who's not a Vikings fan would have ever heard of, but he seems to get catches every single week. So over on 11.5, I think that's an easy smash. And then Mac Jones, I like the under the 252.5 rush and passing yards. I don't think Mac Jones has a good week. So those are the over-under lines I like, Josh. Looks like you don't like any.
I didn't take the time to open the app, so I just decided that this week I'm riding off in the sunset with my 2 for 2 last week. So if you listened to me last week, you put $1,000 down on, like I said, you probably won some money. So congrats.
But Josh, I mean, you're not going to be able to, feel this way after you win all your contests on Sunday.
Here comes the money.
Here we go. Money talk.
Here comes the money. Money, money, money.
You don't want that to be you on Sunday?
No, that's going to be me on Sunday. I'm just not going to share my money with everybody else.
You're selfish with it. All right,
it's not Christmas yet.
All right, let's move into the mighty triumphant return of the Medical Minute. And actually, Jamie gave this to us like last Saturday. I don't think we would have had it in time for the show, so the injury the Medical Minute relating to is a little dated. But Eric's, I'm glad you've tuned in live. We're actually going to be talking about TJ Watt's pec tear. Jamie is a real-life doctor. She has her medical degree, and she's a year more of a doctor than she was last year. So Jamie does in fact know a lot of stuff, and she knows what she's talking about. So without further ado, I'll let Jamie, a real life doctor, get into it and talk about a pectoralis tear, specifically one suffered by TJ Watt in week 1 of the NFL season. Dr. Jamie Hammer, take it away.
Hey guys, Dr. Jamie Hammer here with this season's first Medical Minute. There's going to be no shortage of material here, as already in the first game of the season of the Steelers versus the Bengals, TJ Watt went to go tackle Joe Burrow and experience what we think is a partial tear of his pectoralis tendon. I'm going to give a little bit of information about what a pectoralis muscle is, how you tear it, and then how you fix it. The pectoralis muscle is the sexy pec muscle on the front of the chest. It connects between the breastbone and the clavicle, and it attaches onto the head of the humerus. So if you feel on your own body sort of that pectoralis muscle on your chest, and then you feel where it comes in to insert on the top of your upper arm, you can imagine that it's important in actions like throwing the ball, in actions like rotating your shoulder forward and backwards, and even just in extending and flexing your arm. Any of these motions are controlled by that pectoralis muscle. In order to injure this muscle, you usually have to be in the extended position, and it's also more vulnerable when it's externally rotated. So, for example, if TJ Watt is putting down his right shoulder and looking to dig it into Joe Burrow, you can imagine that he is both extended and he is rotated. That allows you to put some extra force on that, and the most sensitive point is that insertion point on the top of the humerus bone in the arm, and that's where the muscle usually tears. Because this is a weakness injury, that overloading of the muscle is more often to result in a complete tear as opposed to just a partial tear, like in many other injuries that you've heard of. A couple of sports that are more likely to cause a pectoralis tear would be weightlifting, wrestling, football, and parachuting, the all too common increase of force that you experience when you're going from a low to a high gravity situation. The symptoms of a pectoralis tear that TJ Watt probably experienced on the field during his Steelers game would be a pop. That's that sound of the tendon detaching from the bone, immediate pain, probably some weakness and inability to move the arm, as we talked about, and then usually some bruising over the site. It was originally suspected that Mr. Watt was going to be out of the season for the rest of the year, as a full thickness tear requires surgical fixation and usually about 6 months of rehab. However, we've gotten very lucky here that the Steelers are going to get to keep their linebacker because it's apparent that he probably just has a partial tear. This is going to be treated with a sling, probably immobilizing for 3 to 6 weeks or so, and then just allowing him some time to rest and keep that arm in sort of a neutral position so that those fibers of the muscle can get their strength back and start to heal. We'll probably have to give him some muscle relaxers and some pain medication to treat the soreness that he's going to experience. But other than that, we can expect TJ Watt to make a full recovery, even if he were to require surgery, but that would put him out for the rest of the season. So here's hoping for that partial tear. If you guys have any requests for the next week's Medical Minute, you feel free to hit me up. I'm thinking of doing a weekly or every other weekly segment this year, depending on what sort of material I get. So feel free to hit me up. It's a pleasure to be back. Enjoy your season, boys.
All right, big shout out to Eric's. If you were listening, it seems like, assuming it's the partial tear and assuming his recovery is just fine, it seems like TJ Watt could be back for the playoffs time. I feel pretty strongly right now the Steelers won't be in playoff consideration, but I've been wrong before. Josh, what do you know about pec tears? What do you know about, do you learn anything new there, or anything you're familiar with already for any particular reason? What do you think about that Medical Minute?
Well, yeah, I mean, he'll be back in time to watch the playoffs. He'll be able to reach for that remote.
He'll be able to get that guac scoop just fine.
Yeah. But, I mean, they showed the stat. The Steelers are 0-6 without Watt in their starting lineup and 0-5-1 with him when he gets hurt in the game and has to leave for the remainder of it. So I'm just going to go out there and say the Steelers are done. They don't have their 3 wins yet. So, Gar, congrats on your prediction. But the things that I took from that are TJ Watt needs to learn how to tackle. He sucks at tackling, and he needs to get stronger. He's a weakling because Jamie said that it's excessive force and it's a strength issue. So TJ Watt probably slacking off in the gym, needs to get back in there. And so it's an unfortunate situation that somebody that gets touted as one of the best defenders, but he's a weakling that doesn't know how to tackle. Thanks, Dr. Hammer. I'll make sure TJ hears your opinion.
Excessive force, but TJ Watt's white. He's from Wisconsin. Jesus, the country is really going to shit, isn't it?
Yeah.
All right, Josh, that was the Medical Minute. Please, I've really kind of reduced the number of channels this year. So, I mean, feel free to just call out Dr. Jamie Hammer in the chat, or if you're uncomfortable doing it, you can reach out to me privately, and then I'm not afraid to call out Dr. Jamie Hammer. But she is always looking for content ideas, kind of her deal with this. Like, it's obviously a hobby side project for her. So she's really only going to make these Medical Minutes when she's excited about the topic. And the best way for us, if we do love the Dr. Jamie Hammer content, like I assume we do, because I know I love it. I love hearing a real life doctor talk about this shit. So if we just throw as many ideas at her as possible, she'll take up the one she likes and she'll run with them. So if you have any ideas, whether it's football related or not, please throw some Medical Minute stuff in the chat. And Jamie will make sure it gets to Jamie's attention. I know last year she ended up talking about, I think, anxiety and ADHD. I know that was a Walters request. That didn't have a lot to do with football directly necessarily. So there's no right or wrong answers. We really appreciate Dr. Jamie Hammer. So please let's throw all the ideas at her we can, and then hope that a couple excite her, because I love hearing her talk. So the more content we get out of that, I think the better. Moving into the weekly preview, Josh, we're already over 30 minutes. I know we want to get out of here, but we got Tampa Bay playing Green Bay. You have any thoughts sitting on that, or is there any waiver wire guys you really loved picking up this week? Anything else you want to talk about kind of in this weekly preview here looking into week 3?
Go Packers.
I mean, give us like 30 seconds on the Tampa Bay game. Are the Packers going to get throttled, or with two teams really banged up in the receiver corps, should it be very interesting to watch?
Yeah, it'll be very interesting to watch. I think that when you get two of the GOATs at QB with a lot of the WOATs at receiver, worst of all time, it's going to be an interesting situation. Brady's receivers kind of are more veteran than what the Packers have in their lineups now. Dobbs is supposed to take a huge load, according to Matt LaFleur. Kind of a direct quote. Yep, exactly. Cue the Mike Zimmer meme. But it'll be interesting. Obviously, Jones and Dillon. The defense for Tampa Bay is pretty solid. A lot of injuries on the O-line for both teams. But it sounds like the Packers are going to get their starting lineup back, hopefully with less bruises than before. So, I'm looking forward to the game. It should be good. I don't think it's going to be I think that if this game were to happen later on in the season, it would be a completely different story. But at this point in time, it's just, it's football.
All right, I love your takes, Josh. I'm really interested in the Kansas City game just to see, does Indy absolutely roll over? I think everyone expects KC to win that game, but is Indy absolutely dead? We'll find out. Buffalo, Miami should be very exciting, hopefully. Detroit, Minnesota, that's a game. I'll just say, if Minnesota is the team it thinks it is, Minnesota should win that game no matter how much on the rise Detroit is. I think that game will be a shootout, but if Minnesota loses that Detroit game, there goes the season, I think. We'll probably go like 7-10 or whatever it is. Other games, does Tennessee figure it out? Can they beat Las Vegas? We got 2 0-2 teams, I believe. So Tennessee versus Las Vegas, what happens there? Green Bay, Tampa Bay, we already talked about. And then Monday night, does Cooper Rush do it again? I think that's actually a much more interesting storyline than people might want to think it is. So I'm interested in the Monday night matchup as well. But those are just some key things I'm watching. I don't think I had any big fantasy waiver pickups this week. So watch out for J.K. Dobbins. Does he play as DeAndre Swift? Does Chase Edmonds? There's definitely some people to watch. But as of Saturday morning, 8:35 a.m., we have no idea. So we'll go ahead and get the hell out of here, Josh. You just want to let the people know, go Packers, right? You have absolutely nothing else to say.
Go Packers.
That's all I got as well. Thank you so much for listening. We would love your rants and your raves on Tuesday night for the Tuesday night show, or if you've got some hoodlines, if other people would want to try and participate in that, we would absolutely love it. It seemed to be a fan fave, but thank you everyone so much for listening. We will see you Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Central Time. Love you. Bye. Steelers won't lose Sunday, huh, Erics? Who are they playing? I know we've already talked about it. The Steelers won't lose Sunday. That's correct. They already lost on Thursday. You got me. This crafty Latvian son of a bitch. Go Packers. It would be interesting, Walters, if Tennessee, Las Vegas ended in a tie. I don't think so. But I mean, it's kind of I don't want to say it's make or break for most teams, but it really is if you look at the stats on who does or doesn't make the playoffs after that many losses. Who knows, dude? Should be a good weekend of football, though. And I got nothing to do. Last Sunday I was occupied, so I'll just get to sit there and watch it this weekend.